Next up, I'd like to introduce Emma Winchurch-Beale, who is the International Sales Director of The Washington Post. From a base in London, Emma oversees The Washington Post's international sales strategy, managing international clients and agencies for the Post and for the Post print and digital businesses, as well as leading and expanding the team globally. Emma is going to speak to us about the new wave of AR and VR innovation, immersive storytelling and beyond. Please welcome Emma.
Thank you. So what I wanted to do was really give you a perspective from a publisher's point of view about how AR and VR can help in really bringing stories to life. In order to do that, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the Washington Post, which helps explain why we're investing in new technology to really tell our stories in a more engaging way. So the Washington Post is a news organization. We have news coverage and technology, and Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013, and I think that's been the driving force that has driven us forward in terms of exploring new ways of storytelling. So we have journalistic excellence, as do many brands, and we compete Pulitzer for Pulitzer with many of our competitors. We also have great innovative technology. Obviously, many San Francisco-based companies have great technology, but not all of them can create content. So this puts the Washington Post in a very unique position in terms of focusing on the things that we're good at, which is both journalism and technology. Because Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, he basically enabled us to have a financial runway, which has enabled us to make investments in the product and the development with that. So not only are we increasing the number of journalists that we have, but we've also increased the number of engineers that sit and work behind the scenes. This means that we've now won 65 Pulitzer Prizes, but we're being awarded for our technology. So we were awarded Most Innovative Media Company 2018 by Fast Company. And this goes a long way to explain why we're increasing our investment in the new technology and the ways of telling stories. The other thing that's really important when you're looking at AR, VR options is the speed of your site. We are a mobile-first company, and AR really is dependent upon the importance and the use of your mobile. And we created Zeus, which is a Google AMP technology, to ensure that the mobile version of our site is very fast. So we can now load, including advertising, in less than 0.9 seconds. So with this sort of context in mind, and this growth and expansion, we've now reached 95 million uniques in the US, 22 million uniques in international, and another 9 million uniques on Snapchat. So you can see that we have scale, and scale is something that you want to explore when you're looking at AR options. We're also now in phase 3 of our expansion, which is really about global expansion, to ensure that we're not just a US-focused publication. And although we've introduced a paywall, we've reduced our paywall from 10 articles to 3, we've actually seen an increase to our subscriptions of 1 million plus, which ultimately means that people are prepared to pay for quality. Now, you'll find in your delegate bag the opportunity to have a free subscription to the Washington Post. All you need to do is send me an email and I'll set you up. So in terms of this context, this is really kind of the backdrop as to what we are doing with AR and VR. So in terms of the Washington Post, we have been experimenting with AR for about 3 years. Our very first learning was that it was really important to set up this technology in an existing app with an existing audience. What we found is that if you asked our audience to actually upload another app to enable them to access AR, we lost a lot of scale. So for the last 2 years, we've actually been running AR within our classic app. The other important thing is it's really important to be able to allow your audience to find that content. So in our classic app, at the top of the navigation bar, you'll find a slot that says augmented reality. What we're doing is actually housing all of our augmented reality within this site, because what we're finding is that if someone explores one story that we've amplified using AR, they want to explore other options. And it also enables us to put any brand content AR stories into the same space. The other important learning that we've had is what do you do and how do you create AR stories? We have the technology, but we don't want to just create AR for the sake of it. So what we're really looking at is the types of story that work with AR. So things like tours of museums, sporting events, travel destinations, or family experiences all lend themselves very well to having amplification through AR. The other thing that's really important is that you make it easy for users to access this technology. So we don't tend to use headsets. We would prefer there to be no external trigger, so that they can actually follow this story very smoothly through the app that we have produced. I've got a short film that I'm just going to show you, just a little clip to give you some insights into some of the ways that we've been using augmented reality.
News storytelling used to be confined to words on a printed page, but as technology evolved, so did storytelling methods. That's why the Washington Post was the first news publisher to utilize augmented reality over 2 years ago. By inserting three-dimensional graphics and audio directly into a user's mobile reality, AR allows the Post to fully immerse our readers into content, allowing them to experience the news like never before. Since our AR launch in 2016, we have covered topics ranging from pumpkin carving, architecture, the Olympics, and more. Our focus has continually been to create frictionless AR experience on both Android and iOS devices. To access our augmented reality stories, simply follow these steps. Open the Post Classic app. In the nav bar, which starts with top stories, scroll to the end and select augmented reality. Tap one of the stories in the list. Look for the picture with the word Start. Experience the news through Washington Post augmented reality.
So I've got 3 examples that I'm going to talk to you a little bit more to explain why we chose those particular stories to illustrate through AR and to show you some sort of case studies. So the first one is looking at sort of architectural buildings. So what we were able to do with this particular story is transform and take our audience into a billion-dollar building to kind of bring to life the experience that they would have if they actually visited that building. So using 3D video and audio overlay from our art and architect critic, Philip Kennicott, we were actually able to take our audience to the Elbe Philharmonic Music Hall in Hamburg, where they've installed on the ceiling these amazing acoustic tiles that mean that wherever you sit in the music hall, you will have this amazing experience. So we wanted to take people there without actually taking people there. So what we were able to do is use augmented reality to actually enable a user to point their phone to the ceiling of their home and actually transport the tiles into their own physical space, therefore having the experience that they would have as if they had visited the hall. So I think it's very simple, it's very clever, but it's a very impactful way. And what it does, it builds engagement. Another important area that is good for storytelling is when you're looking at travel destinations. Because travel destinations, you can be taken there by the words that the journalists write. But in addition to that, AR can actually allow the newsroom to export you and tell the story in an even more impactful way. So we've just launched a new AR story for the Yellowstone National Park, which is one of the UNESCO heritage sites. And what we were able to do with this is use 3D video and narrative overview from Andrea Sachs, who's our travel editor, and take you and transport you to the Yellowstone Park. But to make this even more fun and interactive, we were able to pull out objects from each of the UNESCO sites. And here's an example where bisons are obviously prolific in Yellowstone Park, and we were actually able to allow you to bring a bison into your room just by pointing your phone at the wall in your house and actually get a 3-dimensional involvement and learn more about the objects. So we're running this as a series. I think it's also exciting from a commercial perspective because brands want to get involved with these new ways of storytelling. So Lincoln actually were a sponsor of this particular series. I've talked a lot about AR, but we also have VR, and we did, in 2016, experience or do some experimentation around VR. So this, we wanted to take our readers to a place they've never been before. So we decided to take them to Mars to explore the craters and to see, I'll just go back one so you can see it again. So the challenge with this is, first of all, the navigation. So each of the white markers is a mini story within the story. The other challenge of this particular VR was that we had to ensure that the story flowed, that you felt like you were on a journey, but we didn't know where the audience was going to start the story. So it had to really flow, so it didn't matter where you picked up a white marker, you would still feel like you were on a journey. The other challenge with this VR is that in 2016, headsets technology is not where it was now. Also, there was much more limited access. So in order to kind of overcome some of those challenges, the newsroom also created the story as a web-based story. But I think now with the way that technology is evolving with headsets, we will be able to explore and create more VR stories as we go forwards. So I think it's important to think about augmented reality as part of many different ways of telling stories. I think obviously you can have data-driven, you can have graphic, automated, and augmented. And augmented reality should play an important part as long as it actually brings more to the reader and actually brings to life the story and transforms you in a way that words need some sort of augmentation. We can also use these in the brand content perspective. Obviously, I focus very much on what we're doing editorially, but augmented reality can play a part in brand content creation, and we can make them interactive. It can be personalized. You can use immersive video and 360 degree, and I've just got a short video to show some examples of what we're doing around brand content. So I think the big takeout from a publisher's perspective is AR is a great new technology that we can really evolve and tell our stories better with. But just because we have the technology doesn't mean that we should always run an AR story, and that it's really important to filter AR and VR into other ways of telling stories. But watch this space because it's an exciting time for all of us. Thank you.
So that was really interesting. So now we have Emma from the Washington Post and Michaela from Blipper available to take questions. So do we have any questions from the floor? We can bring a microphone to you. Okay, will you wait 1 second for a microphone? And then it could be useful if you could say where you come from and who you are to give context to your question.
Is this on? Yes. My name's Jack Dyson. I work at SAP, and I do a lot of B2B content. And we have in-house internal agencies as well as externals. I've always been a big fan of AR storytelling and how it can add another dimension. But it's quite a tricky thing to bring into teams and sort of ad hoc projects. From your experience, what's a good sort of starter technique to try, or to sort of, are there any sort of easier ways of implementing it or bringing it into stories without having to go full massive production teams on it? What are the barriers to entry?
Hello, is this working? Let's see. Is this still working? Oh yeah, okay. So first of all, I would say that today the advantage is that we are able to create AR experiences much faster and much cheaper. So what you'll find is that there's a lot of drag and drop tools where it's like a PowerPoint essentially, where you can put an image, put a few images, and have an AR experience just in a few minutes. So something we didn't have a few years ago. So I think that's a great way of having people start building small AR experiences. You don't need any development, any developer skills or any coding skills. Just as a designer, you can do that. And I think that's a great way of starting to do prototypes, engage people. And what happens there is that then people start understanding the dynamics of AR, because you are producing for something completely different, right? You're in the physical world, but it's digital, it's in 3D, or in a three-dimensional space. So that I would recommend that as a great way, as a starting point to do that, to do things internally. And then usually that would really start, provoking ideas and having brainstorming in teams that then come up with bigger things for that you want to invest in maybe later in time.
And I would say, what are your KPIs? What is it that you want to achieve? Does augmented reality add value? Does it really transport that piece of content into something more engaging? Or are you thinking of as, is it just a gimmick that's going to maybe attract people? So I think if it actually transports you, can build engagement with the story, actually answer some of the KPIs that you have, then it would be worth exploring it.
Emma, can I ask, do you have KPIs at the Washington Post for how much of your content will be available this way, or future KPIs?
I mean, I think the journalists certainly approach the story if it warrants an execution that we did something for the Olympics, which clearly was interactive, it was fun. You saw the pumpkin carving, that was a really simple version, but it warranted usage. So I think from an editorial perspective, I can't speak for them because I'm in the commercial team, but if it warrants and actually adds value, brings the physical into someone's home, then they will look at that as part of how they tell that story.
And I think today the success also not only comes from the content itself, which could be absolutely amazing, but the way you communicate that to the client. So, for example, the way you did it to have, augmented reality very prominently on the app, something like that makes a huge difference. Then, oh, it's a new thing, let's hide it somewhere, and then people are disappointed by the results. So the communication is as important as the experience by itself.
Any more questions? George?
Hi, it's George. So I'm from HP, probably I'm tag teaming with Jack up there. But actually, on a related note, do you have actually a really good B2B example, maybe, of which you could share with us using AR?
Yeah. So we have lots of B2B examples around staff training. This is where there's the most impact. So, for example, we have an example with Cisco, where you scan one of the machines, and then it starts telling you, click on this button to do that, and explains exactly how it works. So really kind of killing the long manuals, which I hope happens quite quickly. A lot is used also for staff training, for example, trying to represent new medical devices. So, these are complex products, they're complex machines, so they're represented in 3D, and then people learn about them in that way, and then they go and explain to the consumer. So staff training is one of the, I would say, one of the best use cases on the B2B side.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from the floor? I just have a final question. So, oh, did I miss an arm?
Be careful, it's like an auction.
Just a question, where do you see this in, I want to say 5 years' time, but I think it's evolving so fast. So in 2 years' time, where could this be? And then potentially in 5 years?
I think, well, depending on kind of headsets and that development, certainly from a VR perspective, I think AR just is rapidly evolving. So I'm sure, you know, this time next year, there'll be another technology or something else that will speed things along even more. So.
And I would say that, first of all, we're going to see it in many more applications. So not just in a gimmicky way, but in quite a strategic way, like the Washington Post is doing. So embedding that, and then in the next 2 years, probably the beginning of some glasses and hardware also enhancing that. And I would suspect as well integration also directly into the camera. So today we use AR through apps. We're starting to see that coming into web-based AR, which we're already doing. But the next stage of that is that it will be directly into your camera, and the cameras of our phones will become smart cameras.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, everybody, please join me in thanking Emma and Michaela.
Thank you.